Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the very first segment of Talk to the Fedora on connecttv.ca. I'm Jarrod Goldsmith from eSAX Virtual Events, and today we're going to be chatting about some hard-hitting, honest entrepreneur wisdom that you can use to promote and brand your small business. Our special guest today is Karla Briones. Karla is a business strategist who coaches new immigrants, BIPOC, and underrepresented business owners on becoming successful entrepreneurs with scalable ventures. She's the founder of Immigrants Developing Entrepreneurs Academy, IDEA, great acronym, an online platform designed to educate and connect newcomers to the Canadian business ecosystem. She's a National Capital Immigrant Entrepreneur of the Year Award recipient and a TEDx speaker on the topic of immigrant entrepreneurship. Karla is a small business columnist for the Ottawa Citizen, an entrepreneurship professor at Algonquin College, and serves on the board of directors for the Ottawa Markets and the Ottawa Board of Trade, as well as volunteering as a business mentor for Futurepreneur Canada and other local entrepreneurship community groups. Karla also owns Global Pet Foods Canada and Hintonburg, Freshie, Westboro, and Karla Briones Consulting. I'm very pleased today to be welcoming Karla Briones to the show.
Jarrod, thank you so much for having me. Oh, there I am.
Hi, Karla. Thank you so much for taking the time today. So, Karla, we could go on and on about some of the very many exciting things you've been up to, but let's try to focus on a few of them. Let's talk a bit about your background. Who are you? What's your business organization? And in a nutshell, maybe 5 minutes or so, how you came where you are right now.
Yeah, so first of all, who am I? This is a way that I like to introduce myself. I am a mom. I'm a mom of 2 beautiful children. I am an immigrant. I'm originally from Mexico, and I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur. I like many things, and I like to dive in really hard on everything that I do. And yeah, in a nutshell, that's who I am. I am really proud of my Mexican roots, but I'm also extremely proud of my Canadian branches. And I try to, just to give back to the community as much as I can and just really enjoy doing what I do. In a nutshell, that's basically who I am.
I mean, there's no doubt that you like to get involved. You're a mover shaker in the city. You like to make things happen. But Karla, let's talk a bit about the origin story. Did you have a background in entrepreneurship?
Not at all. None whatsoever. So my dad has always been an entrepreneur. So at least I had that example, or that that person in my life that kind of paved the way for me, or gave me a really good example. But believe it or not, my background is in journalism. So I went to university to become a journalist. I realized very quickly that English is not my first language. There were so many other very extremely talented journalists, fellow students, that I decided that probably journalism wasn't the career choice for me. And then that's when I decided to venture into entrepreneurship.
At what point did you realize that, Karla? Did you work in the journalism industry for a while?
I mean, I was a student. I was a student, and it would take me, because when I started university was also when I had just arrived to Canada. So my English was the equivalent of your, say, for example, French. If you go to high school here in Ottawa and you go, to an English school and they teach you French, that was my equivalent of my English. So my English was okay, like I could understand, but it was never university level. So it was pretty hard, and I would get edited by all my profs, and I very quickly realized that that maybe I could go and do something differently. So and then I did end up joining public relations, so like the dark side of the journalism world, and did media relations. And like whenever I would have to write press releases and whatnot, it would always take me much longer, and I would have to work twice as hard. So eventually I realized that, well, maybe I can move on to something different, and that's when entrepreneurship came about.
Excellent. Well, those types of backgrounds are fabulous experiences for being an entrepreneur, because as we know, there's so many different parts of being a business owner that we might not already have the experience of, but we rely on the past. And I wish more people had a background in PR and writing journalism like you do, because often we see people who do social media posts or comments, and it's not really perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And it is, at the end of the day, it's about adapting and being resilient, right? And then and that's it's true for being an entrepreneur and for being a successful entrepreneur, being able to look at adversity straight in the eyes and figure out how you're going to make this work. And actually, I went into journalism school. I didn't get accepted into my second year of journalism school, but I kind of negotiated with a professor and he gave me the point 0.5 mark that I needed in order to get into second year. So it was like, like failure is not an option, which is the same thing that happens when you're an entrepreneur. You figure it out. You figure out the way to make it work.
Right. I mean, wow. Just talking about being able to realize that you needed that little mark and how can you negotiate to get things happening?
My dad taught me well.
So, Karla, that brings us to our next question about some of the challenges. As a young woman new to Canada at that point, what type of challenges did you face besides the language? You talked about adapting, resiliency, and how has that changed you as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it was really interesting because coming from a mostly male-dominated country, which is Mexico, coming to Canada, it was actually liberating. It was the first time that I encountered the word feminism, and like all of these different topics that I never even realized were a choice and that were something that I was able to do. So and living at home, I was living in one world, and then going to university, I was living in a different world. So it was trying to navigate living in two worlds at the same time, and really honor my roots, but then also try to fit in and try to make friends, which was really hard at the beginning, knowing where how much can I show myself of my true self and how much do I have to actually blend in order to fit in. So I think that some of my struggles initially was trying to fit in a new country that I knew nothing about. In terms of in entrepreneurship, it was especially at the beginning, it was fitting in as a woman in a mostly male-dominated industry, which is the pet industry, believe it or not. Back in the day, so I've been open for 13 years. It was extremely male dominated, and trying to, as a woman, I was in my late 20s, so people would think that I was just an attendant of the store. And then when they would have to speak to the manager, I'm like, well, you're talking to it. Well, I want to talk to the owner. Well, you're talking to her. So there were, trying to really prove myself that I belong in the business world, that I'm a woman, I'm a visible minority. I may have an accent sometimes, and that's okay. And that's the beauty of Canada, because, where we make this country better. But it was a little bit challenging at the beginning, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about work-life balance. Those of us who are starting up a business, we work all the time. It's a fallacy. I'm sure you hear it all the time with your consulting branch. Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Oh, I want to have 4-day weekends. Oh, I hope to get there one day.
Right.
So can you talk a bit about some of the work-life balance issues that you've had?
Yeah. So when I first opened the first business, I was also a new mom. So there was no life and work balance at all. And when I was trying to navigate my new life as a new mother and my new life as an entrepreneur, it was like I was taking care of two different babies, right? Like my real baby and then my business baby. And sometimes women, particularly type A personalities, we want to do everything ourselves, and we want to, show that we can do it and that nobody can do it better than mama, nobody can do it better than, the owner. And that created an unbalance in my personal life, in my mental wellness, in my everything, and it was chaotic. There was very little sleep. There was learning a lot of things at the same time. It was a steep learning curve. And then eventually, there was a breakdown that needed to happen in order for me to actually trust that I could trust my team, that I could trust my partner, that I could let go and actually become better at delegating, which at the end, it makes you a better leader. So I was trying to do everything myself. That didn't work. There was no balance until something had to give. And unfortunately, it was a nervous breakdown that needed to happen. But it taught me a lot. And ever since then, I've been able to, now delegation is my middle name.
Yeah, so often we hear about people having mental health issues, especially during COVID. I know you're quite a big advocate for that. But starting out, Karla, like the whole issue of trust, we think that we could do everything on ourselves. We're the only ones who could do it. It has to be perfect. It has to be my way or the highway. And how did you realize that you needed to bring others on your team?
Yeah, it was, I mean, I guess that's a very rookie mistake when it comes to entrepreneurship. And I mean, I completely understand with my clients and with myself as well. It's like you want to learn everything about the business because you want to make sure that if and when you hire someone, you're able to delegate that work. But then, the problem is when you continue doing it because it's going to take you longer to explain it to somebody else, and it's just better for you to continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that definitely did not work for me. When I realized that I needed help, when I wasn't sleeping, there weren't enough hours in the day. I found myself also very ashamed, because I thought that asking for help or delegating was a source of weakness for some reason, that I wasn't made to be, that entrepreneur that you see in the movies, that go-getter. And that if I were asking for help, or if I was, delegating some of my responsibilities to somebody else, that maybe in a way I had failed, my entrepreneurship career. And again, this is very early on in my career. And I see that also happening in my clients, that they're very, there's a bit of shame, and there's a bit of feeling that if they ask for help, or that if they delegate, or if they offload stuff, or if they hire a subcontractor, that for some reason they've failed at something in their business, which is completely the opposite. It makes you even a better leader and a better entrepreneur if you're able to delegate and grow. You're able to scale faster, and sleep at the end of the day.
Some people refer to business as, like working in a war. Okay. Like I remember somebody told me years ago, they said, "Hey, Jarrod, when you're starting out, would you rather follow a young new lieutenant right out of, military school in the trenches, or a grizzled sergeant who's been there for 4 years?" So finding people who've been there and done that and learning from them is such an important part.
And it's hard. It's hard too,
Yeah.
right? It's hard to find that person, because when entrepreneurship is very lonely. It's an extremely lonely journey, as you probably, can identify with that. And at the beginning, your eyes are down. You're just focusing on your business, and you kind of let everything else blur out. And and sometimes when you look up and you say, "Holy crap, I need to reach out and I need to ask for help," it's either because you're already here, you're already drowning, and you're like, "Oh my God, I need to look out for someone to help me." And it's hard to find someone. It's, if you don't know somebody, particularly for underrepresented entrepreneur, which are the majority of my clients, it's hard, right? Like, it's hard to know where to go if you don't have a network, if you're new in the country, if you don't have family that's been, an entrepreneur before. It is really hard to ask for that help. And a lot of the times they want to ask for help, they want to reach out, but they just don't even know, where to look.
And how would you suggest to people starting up a business, or they're at that stage, maybe a couple of years in, they're not sure if they should sink or swim? That's a very tough, soul-searching decision. Thoughts, like newcomers in particular, underrepresented entrepreneurs, where do they go for resources?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Canada is the land of many resources. And as an outsider, or like a person that is not originally from Canada, and I'm not used to, there's some other people that they're not used to their governments helping them that much. Believe it or not, Canada has tons and tons of resources that sometimes it's overwhelming, the amount of resources, and you don't even know which one is the right one. And the number one resource that I tell anybody, whether they're immigrants or Black entrepreneurs or women entrepreneurs, any type of actually anybody, any entrepreneur, is to look for the small business enterprise centers. I think that would be my very, very, very first go-to. So SBEC for short. So Small Business Enterprise Center. Every city in main-ish city.
Oh, looks like Karla just stepped out for a moment. Oh, there we go. Karla,
I don't know what happened. I didn't touch anything. Anyway, so yeah, so Canada, every main city in Canada has a small business enterprise center, which is basically a place where if you have an idea of a business, if you're starting a business, if you have a business, is where you can get some resources, workshops. You can get paired with mentors, coaches. You can talk to accountants. You can talk to lawyers, so on and so forth. So I think that would be my very, very first place that I would recommend. And then the second one, if you're in that second year where you're kind of like, oh my God, connection is everything. And again, every main city would have some sort of board of trade or chamber of commerce, which, depending on the city that you live in, they may be pretty active. And it's just another way to connect with other people so that you don't feel that you're doing this alone.
Yeah, I found that very active to get involved with the local chambers of commerce here in town. It's helped my business immeasurably. But there are, in some cases, costs associated with this. Everybody is looking as a small business owner startup. Do you spend $30, $40 going to an event? How do you justify that? What do you think?
I think, yeah, you do have to be selective in the types of events that you attend, what you say yes to, what you say no to. But I think that as a rule of thumb, what I do for my businesses is that I dedicate about 1% of my revenue in like networking events and that type of activity. So I look at it as an investment for my business, but I take it off my revenue. So if I know, the smaller the revenue, the smaller opportunity or the smaller budget you're going to have, but at least it gives you 1% of your revenue that that you can afford for events like that.
That's a really good way to look at it, because a lot of the times, I'm sure you come across people as well. They think, oh, it's a time commitment. I don't know if I could spend that money. And I think, well, where are the types of people you want to connect with?
Exactly.
Do they go to all the free meetups out in city, or do they go to professional organizations like, in our case, the Ottawa Board of Trade?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. There's some meetups that are actually good. Again, it depends on what you want the networking for. I do recommend meetups, particularly for the newcomer demographic that are just starting out, and mostly for them to kind of get their feet wet and doing networking outside of their cultural communities. Just so that they can start to get their feet wet on meeting other types of individuals. But yeah, I mean, making sure that you look at, instead of looking at it as an expense, looking at it as an investment, because you never know who you're going to meet. And networking, like the word says, it's about working. It's not called net eating or net sitting. It's net working.
No.
You actually have to use it to work, and sometimes, because a lot of people are not used to it. It's a muscle. Like networking is a muscle, and I mean, this better than anybody else. You're Mr. Networker. But I usually, what I tell my clients is, like, if you're going to be going to a networking event, go with a goal in mind. What is your goal? Is it to talk to one person? Is it maybe to introduce yourself to a completely new person that you never talked to? Or perhaps it's, I don't know. So whatever, it's like, go with one goal in mind so that you feel that, that meeting was worth it and that you actually got something out of it. It may not necessarily be business right away, but at the very least, it's going to be a new connection, 1, 2, set yourself a goal so that you go with something in mind.
Sure. And a lot of the times we see people go to the events and they try to give out business cards to everyone. And yeah, that's the impression I have as well. And I've been saying for years that the purpose of this networking is to develop a relationship, and relationships take years.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And now our next question, Karla, is all of these relationships, the rapport, the goodwill that you have throughout the city, right? That takes a bit of personal branding, but also the concept of collaboration. How important has collaboration been for your business?
It's been amazing. It is a give and take collaboration, obviously, but it's been fundamental in actually every business that I own. And it's collaboration in a way that you don't necessarily expect something in return, and that's when magic happens, right? It's when you collaborate with somebody or an organization or whatnot because you really want them to do well and you really want this to be a win-win or a triple win. So going in a I don't know, going in with the mentality that it is that you're going to be able to give something to them. And if they're able to give something back, or if that collaboration brings something back, amazing. Obviously, you have to be a little bit strategic about your collaborations, but going with the mentality of how can you help them? What can you bring to the table so that they benefit from whatever work you're doing with them? And that has worked for me. A lot of the times initially, the collaborations would be unpaid, volunteered and whatnot. And I mean, that's building, like you mentioned, your brand. That's building good karma. And you know, you're gonna see the results you know, come back to you.
Yeah, there's no doubt that at any stage of your business, starting out, you've been around for a long time, doesn't matter. People are going to want something. And it's a matter of, rather than being known as the, you know, take person, if you change your focus and offer how you can help, like you said, that would really pay dividends in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've seen it in that I've done it and that I've actually received. Even small things like, hey, you know, just like an email. I read this article and it made me think of you. And even that level of thoughtfulness can reap benefits on both sides. Like I've done it to people and I've done it selflessly. Like I've really done it. Hey, you know, I actually really thought about you when I read this, but then all of a sudden that single act of, you know, kindness, it comes back to you. They will remember that. You
Mhm.
will remember that if somebody does that for you. So it's a give and it's a take. And but the more you give, it's karma. Karma's a beautiful thing. The more you receive.
That's a great way of looking at it. You know, a lot of the times we think of successful entrepreneurs. You know, I could talk about the Silicon Valley hero myth. Maybe we'll talk about that in a moment. But some of the entrepreneurs who are well known, or even artists, you know, who might have a bad reputation. You know, they're mean. They don't talk to people. And you know what? Always think, like we talked about, think big. You know, when
Mm-hmm.
you are at that level, and that level is whatever you can imagine it could be, do you want people to say to you, you don't reply emails on time, you don't show up, you're late, or it's like, wow, Karla, she was excellent to work with because XYZ. It is developing this reputation that starts at the very beginning of your business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Over deliver. I like over deliver in everything, in kindness and service, in you know, like collaborating, and just over deliver, and it's gonna come back. It does. It always comes back, and it's not always about money. That's another thing. It's not like, for me, it's you know, money comes eventually, and money comes it's inevitable. But if you put money at the forefront of everything that you do, then um it doesn't work that way. I don't know, for me it's like, I don't know, I'm just going to build up my karma. I'm going to build up, you know, servicing my community, servicing others, and I know this is going to, it's going to come back. It's a terrible business strategy, by the way. um but but it makes you human. It makes you
Yeah.
human. It makes you relatable.
Well, I could absolutely relate to that, Karla, because I was never motivated by money myself. You know, that
Hmm.
community mindedness. You get involved, you volunteer on this board, this committee, you spread yourself pretty thin, but you're helping, you're doing something. And
Yeah.
like you said, karma is a beautiful thing. It will come
And
back in the long run.
yeah, and it gives you a purpose, right? And it gives you a purpose in those times where, you know, God, like in COVID times. I mean, I'm very public about about everything, but I'm very public about my mental health. And I find that when I am of service, when I am servicing my community, when I'm doing something selflessly, and if I'm going through, you know, like a dip in my mental health, being of service, it just all of a sudden changes my outlook in life, changes all of a sudden it brings a positivity to it, and it makes me feel like I have a purpose. And yeah, so anyways, I know I'm preaching to the choir here.
Well, I mean, the purpose of this segment, Karla, is to help small businesses and startups learn about entrepreneurship. And many of them might not have the background or the, you know, the awareness of what they don't know yet.
Absolutely.
So, let's talk a bit about, I alluded earlier about the hero entrepreneur myth, right? We think of the Silicon Valley people, usually young males who have a tech startup. They live on coffee, they sleep at their desk, and they fail 2, 3, 4, 5 times. But the sixth time, they sell something for $90 million and they're an overnight success. Everybody wants to be part of them. How realistic is that?
I mean, that's a very sensationalized way of looking at entrepreneurship. I think that's not the only entrepreneurship there is out there. It is a very intimidating idea of entrepreneurship that perhaps deters people from choosing this path, because they think that if they're not able to keep up with that if they're not that tech darling, or high tech darling, then they're not really entrepreneurs. They're just solopreneurs, and there's all of these other types of terms. So in terms of how realistic is this, not really. But I think the one thing that I can say is true and common amongst that type of entrepreneur, any other kind of entrepreneur, is the grit. I mean, at the end of the day, these guys, Silicon Valley people, they are working their asses off. And so is everybody else too. So how relatable that type of entrepreneur is with the rest of the world, in my personal opinion, I don't really relate to that type of entrepreneur. And has that made me doubt myself about what kind of entrepreneur I am, if I'm like really making it big in this world? Yes, absolutely, 100%. It's totally made me doubt myself. Like, am I really an entrepreneur? Like, or am I just like a little? And also, I'm a franchise owner, so that's another level. Like, am I really an entrepreneur? Because I'm not really creating something from the ground, really. So I don't know. There's a lot of mental blocks that we all individually have to go through, but I just believe that entrepreneurship is entrepreneurship, and it doesn't matter, the size of your exit or the size of your, your company gets acquired or not. Where, if you have a little side hustle, you're still an entrepreneur. It doesn't really matter. Yeah.
I mean, the big picture, the concept of money, the relationship that everybody has with money probably starts at a young age. And as we know, most people are not taught how to use money when they're young, let alone business. Mm-hmm. So when we think about doing the freebie gigs, we all have to do it for the exposure once in a while. Okay, there are times, at least in my experiences, where we have to do it. But how important is that for the long-term aspect of a business?
Well, it's unsustainable, right? Because exposure is not going to pay your rent.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
Yeah, exposure. Like I need to pay my rent. I need to grow a business, and I can't grow a business just with exposure alone. I mean, we have to be realistic here. So, and it's funny because when I have a hard time, still to this day, I have a hard time because of the audience that I'm serving, the community that I'm serving, which has underrepresented entrepreneurs. A lot of the times, these underrepresented entrepreneurs are underfunded. They're under everything, right? So sometimes I have a hard time charging for my services, or charging what I know I'm worth for my services, in an effort to help my audience. But then actually, a business coach that I know, she mentioned, okay, so what else? So if you're not going to be charging money at the beginning, what else can you do that's actually going to benefit you, other than just exposure? Perhaps, I mentioned their newsletter, or I mentioned in their email list, or perhaps they have access to something that you need. So you start bartering a little bit, so that there is some sort of benefit other than just exposure. And then eventually you become confident enough in the value that you're providing, that asking, well, do you have a speaker budget, or are you working with a speaker budget if it's a speaking engagement, and it's just a question like that that it gives you a little bit of confidence, and to be able to ask those questions, and if they say no, then what is going to be your canned answer, or your canned response. But yeah, exposure, just like working for exposure it happens is a lot, unfortunately. But working for exposure, it's unstable.
Yeah, as a full-time musician, one of
Oh,
my businesses, used to hear it all the time.
yeah.
And I mean, we also have to be worried about being taken advantage of. As a small business, we think, oh, I want to get into XYZ, and sometimes the bigger businesses try to leverage that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and so that they'll take advantage of it, and again, you just have to be equipped with some canned responses of the, do you have a speaker budget, or what kind of budget are you working for or with for this event, and again, that was just like, I have like little canned questions that this business coach told me about what are some non-aggressive but still firm ways of bringing it back to the person to say, it is not going to be for free.
Yeah. And let's talk about processes, Karla. You have quite a few businesses, a couple of franchises with Global and Freshie. And how important are processes for you?
They're life-saving. They're the difference between being able to sleep at night or not. Yeah. So processes are like standard operating procedures are my Bible. And some of them are very like standard, others are very unofficial, but I basically take a look at the business, whether it is the restaurant or the retail stores that I have, or even my consulting, and I try to dissect the different moving parts of the business. And then I start to take a look at, okay, what are in all of these areas of the business, whether it is, say, for example, in the retail, inventory management, staffing, accounting, relationship building with suppliers. What are those repeatable tasks that I'm doing over and 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 over? Okay, can I create some sort of system that I can, then copy paste, or can I automate something? Can I delegate this to somebody else, so my time is better spent doing something else? So again, it's like really taking a look at your business on the macro level, dissecting it in 4, 5 different areas, and then like examining each and every area and seeing what are those repeatable tasks that I could either automate or I could delegate, and then then create the system for that, and then keep doing that until you're able to walk, to wiggle yourself out of the operations of the business and really work on the business as opposed to in the business.
Yeah, I think that might be an underrated but a very important part of any business venture, is the idea of processes. For instance, I realized this 10 years ago when I was starting. Many of the times you're going to send a similar email or a reply to somebody who asks a similar question. And instead of, let me back up. A few days ago, I was talking to an entrepreneur, and I said, when you get an email, how do you reply? She types everything out every time. And I said, oh my gosh, why don't you write it once, put it into a Word document, copy paste, and make sure you tweak it and read it 4 times before you send it.
Yeah, I have that on my notes too. And actually, this is another really cool trick. I have clients who get, send their quotes, and they get pushback from potential clients, and oh my God, it's so expensive. Or they have a client and there's always going to be a client and that is going to complain about something, or there's always going to be the same thing that people are going to be complaining about. But when you're in the middle of it, when you're in the middle of the conflict, depending on your personality, sometimes you don't want that friction, and you tend to like procrastinate on responding to the person. You end up giving in. You end up saying yes as opposed to no. You end up doing all of these things. So what I recommend my clients to do is that before you even, there's probably going to be the things that your clients are going to be complaining about most of the time, or the same problem over and over. So what can be a canned response that you can have in a Word document or in a notes that you're able to write now before the conflict starts, so that when you're in the middle of that conflict, you do not give in, or you don't say yes to something that you meant to say no. So you just copy paste that response and then customize it a little bit and you send it out. So but I 100% agree. Like, those systems on making sure that you're not recreating the wheel every time, they're pretty useful.
Yeah, and it's the same thing like invoices or, a contract or a rider. You do it once, and almost every few days, even 10 years in, I'm still tweaking a couple of wordings here and there.
Absolutely. And now there's a lot of software too, like
Yeah.
Honeybooks and whatnot, that, somebody sends you an email and then you can automate a lot of like the responses, the contracts. And then once they sign the contract, you send the invoice, and it's all automated so that you don't even have to worry about that. You just set it once and then forget about it.
Would you be comfortable sharing some of the automation that you use?
Yeah, for sure. So I use Honeybooks for my client work, so that whenever I get any inquiries from through my website, then it kind of triggers a whole bunch of responses depending on what is it that they're asking for. And then if a client needs to sign on a contract, then they sign the contract, and then the invoice is sent automatically. And if it needs to be paid in 3 different payments, it's all done automatically. So I don't have to worry about that. So Honeybooks is awesome. In terms of email marketing, I use ConvertKit. ConvertKit is amazing because I can segment my audience, and again, I can do a chain of emails after they sign up to a newsletter, after they download a document. So Convert and Honeybooks are my lifesavers for sure.
Well, thank you, Karla.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the successes you've had.
Okay.
What successes, and you see where this is going, would also like to talk about failures afterwards, or how people perceive failures. But what successes are you most proud of?
I am proud of, so I'm gonna be a little corny, I guess, but I think my biggest success is being able to have 2 amazing kids that are very in tune with who they are, and they're not afraid to speak up, and they're not afraid to truly show their colors. I have a trans son, and it's just amazing to see him flourish in the person that he's meant to be. So I'm very proud to be able to provide a home that is safe enough for him to come out and to tell me and to talk to me about all these issues. So and obviously I haven't done it alone. I do it with a supportive husband. In terms of entrepreneurship, one of the things that I'm most proud of is providing a safe space for underrepresented entrepreneurs to feel heard and to feel like they have a community, that they have somebody that champions them and that supports them, and sharing. Like, I have a lot of knowledge and a lot of network, and through my, sorry, that's my cat. She wants to leave the room. Somebody closed my room. My cat's like, take me out. Sorry. So yeah, so being able to basically share what I've gained in the last 13 years of entrepreneurship, share with the next wave of entrepreneurs. And I'm super proud of that. I've created an online academy where I'm teaching the new wave of immigrants how to open up sustainable businesses and successful businesses. Like, what I wish I had, so that somebody would have taken the time to teach me. Like, I'm doing that, so I'm super proud of that. And yeah, and just being able to speak my mind and have people listen and be relatable. And yeah, there's a lot to be grateful for.
For sure, everybody wants or strives to be relatable, especially to our clients. But on the more personal side, having a family who is open to being themselves, that speaks volumes. So congratulations for enabling that. That's fabulous.
Thank you.
And for businesses, it doesn't have to be a huge catastrophic, bankruptcy. It could be something like, oh, I missed a phone call today that I meant to take. It could be, what about some
failures?
Failures, yeah.
Okay, no, for sure. I'm dealing with one right now, actually. I think my biggest failure, my biggest mistake in my entrepreneurship career has been opening the restaurant, opening Freshie. It's been a business that I opened when I had just gone out of like the breakdown, like my overwhelmed breakdown. I took time for myself and I took maybe about a year off, and I'm going to say this quote unquote off, to focus on myself. And, I kind of regained some balance. And then when I kind of came out of that hard place, I had all of this energy. And I'm like, oh my God, I have all this energy. And because I took off that year, I basically made myself redundant in the stores, in the pet shops. So my staff, which basically is every entrepreneur's dream, right? Like I had this problem where I would go to the stores and I wasn't needed. So, but then I had all of this pent up energy that I needed to do something with it. And then I'm like, oh my God, it would be so much fun to open a restaurant. Famous last words, by the way. And I didn't really put in a lot of thought into the long term of owning a restaurant. And I'm paying for it right now. It is, particularly with COVID, it's been devastating. So before COVID, we were thriving. It was a great business. It kind of struggled a little bit in the first couple of years, but then the third year was amazing, and then COVID hit. And it is a tough one. It's a tough business. I am struggling with it. It's a business that I realized very quickly that I wasn't really passionate about. Definitely a big mistake in making that decision. The company is great. It's just that's not my passion. The food industry, the fast food industry it's not really my passion, and I'm paying for it, and it's a commitment of 10 years. Then I'm like, holy crap, I have 5 more years. I'm only halfway there, and 2 of those 5 years it's been in a lockdown and a pandemic. So it's been a lesson learned of not being as passionate is not the right word, but like impulsive, not being as impulsive. And it's definitely made me mature. Although it's been one of my biggest failures because it's tanking. It's doing terribly, by the way. It is what it is. So I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Not for the lack of trying, but anyway, the industry is just doing terrible. Anyway, so all of this to say that even though it's been probably my biggest failure so far, it's also been the business that has taught me a lot. If it wasn't for that business, I probably wouldn't be where I am as a business advisor, because all of the mistakes, all of the failures, all of the money loss, all of the stuff that I shouldn't have signed, that I should have double checked, that all of the shouldas, would've, whatever it's called. That
guessing,
yeah, all of that. I probably did it. I made all of those mistakes with Freshly, so I've learned so freaking much with this business that it has allowed me to have even so much more to give and to teach, and to teach from experience with my clients, so that they don't make those mistakes again. And you bet your butt that I won't be making those mistakes again, but I'm still paying for it. So I guess the silver lining is that the biggest mistake of my life, like the biggest impulse business that I should have thought more about, it's also the business that has taught me probably the most, because of the mistakes, that I'm able to do what I'm doing right now with the next generation of entrepreneurs. So right. I'm trying to look at the silver lining, my friend.
Well, thank you for being so honest with that. It's sometimes not easy to talk about, especially if people are not used to talking about the challenges they faced. Although I would say in a networking event, challenges are a good speaking opportunity to talk to somebody, because we all have challenges in life or business that we might not get support from our family or friends. So
absolutely.
And let's talk about some words of wisdom. You've shared so much, Karla, but we're starting to wrap up our segment today. Would there be some thoughts that you would care to share for, again, the small business, people who are maybe been in business a few years or just starting out?
Your voice matters. I think, and I've learned this actually since the pandemic. I think it was starting with the pandemic that I started to get more involved with the business community and volunteering more and being more outspoken about things, and realizing that, man, my voice actually matters. My voice is actually, if I raise my voice and I make sense, people they are going to listen. If you write letters to your MPs, if you write letters to your counselors, it matters. They do listen, and they do take it into consideration. And coming again from a country where, sometimes it doesn't matter how loud you yell, the government and people are not really going to listen, and they're going to do whatever they want to do. It's refreshing. And sharing your story matters, and sharing your journey as an entrepreneur, your ups and your downs, not just the highlight reels. It does matter because it all of a sudden makes you human. And if you are human to the eyes of your audience, you're relatable, and people are going to be, they're going to want to do business with you. They're going to want to support you. So yeah, if as any small business owner, I always recommend share your journey, like share it. Share your struggles, because a lot of the time that's what people identify with the most. That makes you human, your struggles. Share don't be a Debbie Downer, but share your ups as well. But don't get into this, hole of only showcasing the bold and the beautiful, because that's not what real life is. And you want to make yourself relatable. You want other people to cheer for you, and just raise your voice. Your voice matters. It matters. It matters whether you're, a man, a woman, a visible minority, an indigenous entrepreneur, any type of entrepreneur. Your voice matters, and we should use it more often.
That is so refreshing. Like
that.
So Karla, thank you so much. How can somebody get in touch with you, please?
Yeah, so I do have a website, so people can get in touch with me that way. So karlabriones.com. So my first name, last name.com.
Karla, thank you so much. So today, folks, we were joined by entrepreneur, community business leader Karla Briones on the very first Talk to the Fedora segment on connecttv.ca. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, Jarrod.